across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
It's Daniel Finkelstein sitting in for Gloria Piero. Today, there's a film out about Roald Dahl and his wife Patricia Neal and the tragedy that hit them. Here's a clip.
And his name is Charlie Rocket.
Daddy, I love that you call him that.
He lives in a little house with his mother and father and his father's mother and father and his mother's mother and father.
All in one house?
All in one bed. They're very poor, you see, poor and all called Bob.
All called Bob?
Yes, and both grandmothers are called Roberta. Then there's Grandpa Robert and other Grandpa Robert.
That's funny.
I don't know. Might work.
What sweets do they make?
Oh, incredible ones.
Fudge? Can there be fudge?
Oh, yes, there'll be a whole lake of it.
And gobstoppers?
Oh, yes, they're your favourite, aren't they?
Yeah, but they never last long enough.
Well, these ones will. In fact, these will last forever.
Well, Tom Solomon was Roald Dahl's doctor and friend. He's the author of Roald Dahl's Marvellous Medicine, and Donall McCusker is the producer of To Olivia, which is out today on Sky Cinema and Now TV, and stars Hugh Bonneville and Keeley Hawes. They both join me now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Donall, the film focuses on the marriage of Roald Dahl and Patricia Neal, and give us a sense of the storyline and how the relationship develops.
Well, Roald and indeed Patricia both lived a pretty extraordinary life. And we tell the story, that one particular incident which concerns the Roald and Patricia had moved back to England and were living with their relatively young family when their oldest daughter, Olivia, caught measles. And initially they didn't think that much of it. It was a childhood illness and they were going to get better. But unfortunately, Olivia's disease took a rather nasty turn when she developed encephalitis and then she died. And as a result of that, we chart the stages of grief that Roald and Patricia went through. We, out of that, Roald was writing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at that time, and Patricia remembers that she went on and made the film HUD. In truth, actually, we played around a little with the timeline because our film is concentrating on Patricia's memory and what she felt happened then, and we're trying to be reflective of what happened in regard to the death of their child. And I think that what's pertinent about the time we live in now of immunization and obviously COVID, when we made the film before COVID, but there was obviously measles was still very much in the media, and vaccination. And as you said in your introduction there, the Dahl family, when vaccines against measles became available, were prominent supporters of vaccination, and that's the story we tell.
Tom, it can be odd sometimes seeing people one knows on the screen. One can get distracted by the kind of impersonation, and is it really like the person one knew? But tell us what you made of the film, both the story and of the characters that you saw on the film, in the film on the screen.
Terrible family tragedy, and in that sense it does convey, what an awful time it was for them, as it would be for any family. Roald Dahl was an extraordinary man. I met him towards the end of his life when he was in hospital in Oxford, and even though he was frail from his illness, he was still a giant of a character. And I think Hugh Bonneville conveys some of that and gets some of his voice, his deep booming voice. But of course, in the film, it's some dozens of years before I met him. It's clear that it's the same person being portrayed.
He could be a bit of an angular character. Not everyone loved Roald Dahl personally, did they? But it sounds like you maybe did.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was a patient of ours in hospital, and I think often when people are ill, the layers are peeled away, and you see the real person underneath. And we found that he was really a great bloke. I mean, he was having a difficult time with his illness, as a lot of people do, but despite that, he put a lot of effort into looking after others. He was very concerned about the nurses on the wards, for example, and some of the other patients around him. And he was very interested in what I was doing as a junior doctor, and would be interested in what had been happening to me during the day. And we sort of chatted late into the nights. My book is based around our conversations. My book, Roald Dahl's Marvellous Medicine, and all the things he did in his life to do with medicine, which was not just this campaigning against measles once the vaccine became available, but he was also interested in other aspects of medicine too.
Donal, tell us a little bit more about Patricia Neal, because I suppose more people will be familiar with the name Roald Dahl. They'll still maybe want to see what he was like in, portrayed in film. But Patricia Neal, that's probably less familiar to people now, isn't it?
Yeah, like it's funny the reaction that we've got when we've been making this film. And as you say, Roald Dahl now is much better known. But our movie is set in 1963 when Roald had already lived a phenomenal life in the Air Force and working in America, and was essentially working for Churchill as possibly a spy. But Patricia was a Hollywood movie star and a famous Broadway actress, and had done films like Breakfast and Tiffany's, and was certainly a much more famous character than Roald was at that time. She gave up a lot of that life when she married Roald, and they had their children, and she moved to Great Missenden. So I think that Patricia Neal is a phenomenal woman in her own right, and they were certainly a pretty impressive couple. But you're right in saying it now is not that widely known that Patricia and Roald were married, and they were married for 30 years, albeit it was a difficult marriage at times.
Tom, I suppose people know of Roald Dahl as a writer, both for children and for adults, but I think they'll be less familiar with the idea that he made several medical inventions for hydrocephalus, for example, and for stroke recovery. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so a lot of his interests in medicine related to family tragedies. So the invention for treating hydrocephalus, water on the brain, was after one of his children was involved in a road traffic accident, and the shunt to drain the water on the brain that was used at that time was kept blocking up, and so he invented a new one, which was then used on thousands of children around the world. And the work with the Stroke Association, or with stroke, came because Patricia actually had a stroke herself, and she couldn't talk and couldn't walk, and there wasn't much in the way of physio or rehabilitation back then, so he came up with his own regime and used that to get her going, and that ultimately resulted in the formation of the Stroke Association. But of course, the other legacy, you mentioned the letter that he wrote about vaccination, which prevents measles encephalitis. And in fact, it just so happens that Monday is World Encephalitis Day, when we recognise all the other forms of encephalitis and raise awareness about this condition, which is still seen today.
Well, Tom Solomon, Donall McCusker, thank you. To Olivia, a Sky original film, available now on Sky Cinema and Now TV.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.